Alright people, here we are. Welcome to another episode of the Jokatech podcast, starring yours truly. Now, in this week's episode, just going to briefly discuss the upcoming matchup between Israel Adesanya and Anderson the Spider Silva. Now, at first glance, it's just another upstart battle, another passing of the torch battle, although many are a little annoyed at the premise of it, and I understand that completely, because I'm in agreement with, I don't like torch passing or legend killer fights, because I believe that organizations put those together in order to keep their wheels turning, and they sort of set up in a political way the old legend. But I really don't like the way the legends, and this is across many sports, I don't like the way they cooperate with that process. Almost like they're paid off. They get an unfavorable matchup. They get a matchup at the wrong time or short notice or something of that nature. And then they're in a position where they're facing a young lion and it's an uphill battle. And then you see all this media coverage talking about how prepared they are and how they're ready and this, that, and the third. Then they go in there and they get starched. And it's a shock to all the viewers because everyone eats up the all-access coverage before the fight. But if you actually pay attention, you'll see it's kind of groomed to be a passing the torch fight. And I think this is no different. They do a good job of really buttering this guy up. Adesanya, what I've come to find is, and they did let this out in all access, that Anderson's actually training with somebody who knocked Adesanya out. Prior to that, they were selling him like he was some unbeaten kid who really can't be touched. Now, he's skilled. He has a lot of tools, good speed, good accuracy with his strikes, excellent defensive movement, very reminiscent of a young Anderson in a lot of ways. I think Anderson's a little sharper when it comes to his boxing. I think Anderson has more power. Anderson has a better chin. Adesanya, not only has he been ragdoll before. Now Anderson's been knocked out too, but Anderson's only been knocked out when it's been an overwhelming situation. Adesanya was just knocked out by a journeyman. So it's one of those matchups that's winnable for Anderson, but you know, Adesanya is a young budding kid. He's probably going to grow into light heavyweight at some point. He's 6'4", same size as John Jones. He's kind of being groomed to be that next face of the sport, and you can see it happening. But it's a winnable fight for Anderson. I think a lot of times what it comes down to is how hungry is the legend. Is he in it for a payday, or is he sincerely training? Because Chuck Liddell had me convinced. Like, I bought into that, I'll admit. He had me convinced that he was coming back to win. Although I questioned how quick, and I questioned the opponent. Chael Sonnen has gone on record, Chuck Liddell has gone on record, they all want to talk about how much of a punk Tito Ortiz is. If you know anything about fighting, and you look at Tito Ortiz and his skill set, put aside his personality, put aside all of that, he's a dangerous fighter. And he's always been a bad matchup for Chuck. So he came back and I said, you know what, he's serious about this. But then after the fact, when you look at it, he kind of was in it for the money. And it's sad to see something like that be allowed to happen. But is Anderson in the same position? Is he in it just for the money? Who knows? But the more and more you watch some of these interviews and you watch some of this media coverage, you're starting to see the politics start to surface in MMA. They try to make it look like the UFC is completely devoid of that, but it's not true. I'm watching an interview earlier today with Henry Cejudo, who I respected. He's very intelligent, very skillful athlete, well-spoken. But during the interview that he had with Chael Sonnen, there was just this eerie feeling in the air. Both of them seemed like they were holding back smiles and smirks, and like they were trying to keep a straight face through the conversation, talking about the potential rematch with TJ Dillashaw, or other potential future fights, or where he ranks pound for pound historically. He's riding the entire storyline of being an Olympian medalist and winning the championship from Mighty Mouse. Demetrius Johnson. He's riding that too high, and it's starting to seem like a story arc that he's using to catapult himself into stardom. And you're seeing a lot of this happening in MMA where they're putting their best PR foot forward, and they're really trying to look convincingly like completely squeaky clean, on point, ready for it, ready for the next level in every way type of stars. But then when you really look beneath the surface, you can really see that they're very crude. They're just there to capitalize on a moment. They really don't care about history as much as they let on. They just want to take the reins from all the old legends and ride that wave out. You really see that lack of passion. The whole time he's talking, I'm becoming less and less convinced that he really cares about legacy, and that he's really convinced that he'd do the same thing to Dillashaw again. It started to seem more and more like a WWE promo, the whole interview. And I'm like, it was really cringeworthy. And I hate that word, but that's applicable there. It was very odd, the whole demeanor of the interview. And Adesanya's interviews are similar. He's talking, and he's trying to talk himself up about how unique he is and his upbringing and dealing with racism when he first came to New Zealand from Nigeria. And, you know, I try to relate to his story, but the more he pushes it, the more fake it seems. The more it seems like just a story arc that's there to endear him to the public. So when I see stuff like this taking form, it makes me more so kind of want the legends to hold on. I'd rather see Anderson keep winning. I don't want to see the torch pass if it's just going to be passed just to be passed, just to keep the gears and the business rolling. If it's going to be passed, let the person truly, truly want that mantle. Let him really, really want to be as great as Anderson was or better. Now, you get that vibe from John Jones. He really wants to be the best, but he has his issues. You also got that vibe from DC. But not a lot of fighters from this generation give you that vibe. Even Keith Thurman, at one point, I felt like this guy really wants to be the best. Now he's fallen to the political game. He just wants to pick what's right at the right time. And it's not to exonerate Errol Spence, because Errol Spence is no different. He just feels that's a winnable fight, so he's chasing that fight. But he's another one that doesn't want anything that's going to be uncomfortable and really is not striving for greatness. And a lot of these guys are like that. And everyone praises Terrence Crawford. He's no different either. He has these interviews that he's going on where he's talking about how he's chasing after the top guys in the division. But if you really pay attention, his resume is weak. He likes to refute that, but it's truth. And he is somebody that doesn't go after monsters when necessary, because from what I hear, he wasn't too fond of a fight with Pacquiao at one point, because it's a bad matchup. Pacquiao would probably expose him and derail the whole hype train, and he can't afford that just yet. He's a good fighter, but he's also not somebody who's truly chasing history like that. He'll lead you to believe that, but these fighters don't truly believe in themselves as much as you think. And that's the turnoff to this generation. But because time goes on and people need to replace the old lions, even if there's somebody who doesn't really qualify, they'll put him in that position anyway just to keep things going. And I'm not a believer in that at all. If you don't have that special stuff, you don't have it. I'm not going to say you do because there's nobody else to choose from, and like you're the best available talent. It doesn't matter. If you don't have those X factors, you don't have it. And Terrence Crawford has not shown me that he has those at all. Now, you got fighters like Leo Santa Cruz. He has that special X factor. Mikey Garcia, he has that X factor. They have that desire to be historical combatants. The rest of these guys are just looking to talk as much as they can. Look at Big Baby Miller, Jared Miller. The guy talks so much, and the thing is, it's sad because I really do like Miller. Jerome Miller is a really good, he's a decent fighter, not an amazing fighter. He's another guy that came in from kickboxing, just like Dillian White. And Dillian White's the same, both of them. They talk a lot when the camera's on them and when they're far away from danger. They want this fight, they want that fight, everybody's running from them. I'll take anything. But then you see them fight a journeyman. You see them fade away. And you see this constantly happen where it's just talk themselves up, but none of them really want what they're talking about. And I think that's one good thing about Wilder is Wilder's really exposed that, because there were a lot of times where he was an easy fight. The only reason why he's difficult now, because now after waiting for so long and building up his resume, he's going out to super fights now, and rightfully so. But there was a long time he was an easy fight to make. He was still basically on the come up. None of these guys wanted anything to do with him. That speaks volumes. They all want something to do with him now that they know nothing's going to happen. That's like you're super quiet when there's somebody who's a fighter, a good fighter in the room, and the minute that they're being carried off and they're being taken someplace else, and there's a wall between the two of you. Now you want to fight them real bad, and you'll tear them apart. That grade school nonsense doesn't get over on me. And I also believe Anthony Joshua was a coward too, but I will give him the credit that I do believe he has the skill set to potentially deal with any heavyweight out there. And I think part of him does have that confidence a little bit. But I think it's a lie to say that there's no concern over getting flatlined. He has some concern over what Wilder would do to him. He doesn't want to hold those type of shots. You saw what happened when Klitschko touched him once. He crumbled like paper. And he thanked his lucky stars that another rush didn't happen. No offensive rush from Klitschko the remainder of the fight. He knows with Wilder he's not going to get that. And now he's seen some durability in Wilder's matchup with Ortiz. So there is hesitance there. It's stupid for these idiot pundits like Max Kellerman to talk and say, well, there's no fear from Joshua. He's another guy that... Max Kellerman, don't get me wrong, he has some minute boxing knowledge, but he doesn't have the true textbook knowledge.
Now for a break.
Like guys like Teddy Atlas, or even as much as he gets my nerves sometimes, Paulie Malignaggi. So some of his assessments are a little off. Now Paulie too is a little off too. Some of the things that he said. He had a whole period of time when he was taking shots at Pacquiao. That finally died down. But another thing that he said that was shocking to me was, the thing about Paulie Malignaggi is I would love for him to listen to my podcast one day. I would love for him to catch wind of it, and I would love for him to challenge me to a debate, because most of these guys can't, because they don't have knowledge of the craft. So they kind of have to defer to him. I would love to question him, because it's not that he's wrong most of the time. Paulie's really on point. He really does have boxing knowledge. Most people just don't have that knowledge there to meet him halfway. Even fighters. Because a lot of fighters, they just go through the process. They just want to get on. They don't really study the craft. They just do it. So they can't even contest what he says. But there's some things that he says that I would love to contest. And one of them is, he said it was a robbery, that it was a draw between Wilder and Tyson Fury. And he said, I challenge anybody who questions that to sit down and you try to explain to me otherwise, and I'll make you look stupid. That's his whole little claim. I would love to accept that challenge, because he will not make me look stupid, and I will make him look stupid. What are the criterias for a fight? We all know a championship level fight has a home and away side, has an A and a B side. We all know the scoring criteria for knockdowns in a fight. We're not even talking about the 12th round long count that everyone's talking about. If you understand boxing, you understand that there's no such thing as a long count, because it's not 10 seconds, it's a 10 count. So Jack Reese actually did a very good job in administering the count. Excellent job of assessing Tyson Fury's condition. So that's not a question. I'm not questioning that. Look at that fight and look at rounds 1 through 8. Look at rounds, particularly rounds 3 and rounds 7 or 8. I can't recall which one at this time. But 2 of those rounds, Wilder was on the offense. We're talking about, this is the A side. This is the champion. This is the one defending his belt. 2 of those rounds, early in the fight and in the middle of the fight, Wilder was on the offense. Tyson Fury was on his back foot, and he was trying to be elusive, and he was trying to basically weather the storm in those rounds. He didn't get knocked down in those rounds, but he was on the back foot for those 2 rounds. And then you look at rounds 9, when he was knocked down, and round 12, when he was knocked down, and everyone thought he should have been counted out. Now you take those 4 rounds. The criteria clearly is, why do you think there used to be a 3 knockdown rule, or whatever the case may be? Because at a certain point, the points differential was so great that it's damaging to let a fighter continue, because at this point he's at such a deficit, he no longer has the ability to win the fight. It doesn't take many knockdowns in a boxing match for you to be out of contention and need a knockout. The man was knocked down twice in rounds 9 and 12. There are 2 other rounds at the very least that you can clearly make an argument that Wilder won, strictly off of offense. If he's chasing Tyson around the ring for rounds 3 and rounds 8, and he even actually administered a rush in round 8 to where he started to have some success, and you're going to tell me that he hands down lost those rounds too? There's no way that you can put any criteria at me and tell me that. Now, if you want to say you think that Tyson edged it out, even if you want to say that, you're going to have a hard time squeezing that criteria together, because you already have 4 rounds to contend with. And when I say 4 rounds, I mean you have the 2 knockdown rounds, which are 10-8 rounds, because that's the equivalent of 4 10-9 rounds. You already got those rounds to contend with. So now you got 8 other rounds to convince me that hands down every judge should have seen him winning. Just because somebody is controlling the flavor of a fight, you cannot overlook the fact of 2 knockdowns and dicey rounds in the middle. And before you call something a robbery, you have to remember it has to be completely conclusive. That's like calling a 116-112 card or a fight that was that close a robbery. There's no such thing as a close robbery. You sound retarded saying that. If a fight was close and you feel like somebody did enough to edge it out, say you thought they won, but for you to sit there and get up in arms and call it a robbery, and even Deontay Wilder was a little upset with Paulie, understandably so. You consider yourself to be a historian and an intellect in boxing. You completely disparage yourself with stupid statements like that. And Paulie was going off the other day on Conor McGregor on the radio show, and he's been acting like he's drunk lately. going off on Dana White about how Dana White's a crook, this, that, and the third, which he's not wrong. But he's been real high energy lately. But when it comes to that particular case, I would love to know what came over Paulie to think that, because that's completely counter to boxing knowledge. You're supposed to be somebody who's an authority on this stuff. There's no excuse for you to say something that stupid. And I think there's too much emotion involved with him, especially with the Conor McGregor situation. Because it's true, a lot of what he said about Conor and has said is now coming to the fore. Conor has insecurity issues. He's a control freak. He's unstable. And he doesn't have enough respect for the people around him. I said that before during the training camp. It was a bad sign when he had a falling out with Paulie and dismissed him from the camp. I said, that's not good. This is a guy who has a wealth of knowledge. Why would you lose this guy in your camp going into the Mayweather fight? I knew something wasn't right, but the fact that Conor let that happen. But he is a talented dude who did have some ability. When he first came into the scene, I know Paulie's all emotional and everything, but if you go back and you take that emotion out and you look at when Conor first came from Ireland, he was like a sponge, like a modern day Bruce Lee that just wanted to soak up everything he could learn about martial arts. If he stayed with that mindset, he could have been another Anderson Silva kind of fighter. But the minute he had a little bit of success, he had a little streak of wins, he started racking up titles, he just lost it. And I'm starting to believe also that there are drugs involved, because his behavior became so erratic, he just self-destructed. But for Paulie to completely disparage him like he never had a scrap of talent, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. He went down the line trying to like basically discredit every win. Every single win that Conor ever had. And I'm like, that's a bit far. That's emotional. Now what's not emotional is what Teddy Atlas did with Mike Tyson. Now people had issues with that. But when Teddy Atlas broke down the fact that Mike Tyson never really won, I don't think people understood that interview. When he was on Joe Rogan, he said Mike Tyson never really won a fight. Because anytime he was in a fight, he caved in. If you really look at his career, you don't need Teddy Atlas to tell you that. But most people don't have that kind of boxing knowledge. They look at the fact that he had wins, period. The fact that he was high profile outside of boxing, and everybody judges him off of that. That's why you hear a lot of people that don't know anything about boxing. Oh, who's the best boxer? Mike Tyson's the best boxer there ever was. Oh man, he was the greatest. He was the baddest man. You sound stupid saying that. Even he will tell you he's not. But Teddy Atlas just broke it down. He said, look, they're just certain people that you just see it. You know, you may have a tough upbringing, but how did you respond to adversity when you were coming up? It's not just about living in a tough area. It's about that inbred ability. Do you have the ability to respond to danger with aggression? You have it or you don't. And some people just don't have it. And they could be surly, and it could be this, that, and the third, but whenever they face adversity, they're going to respond the same way that's true to them. And he really broke it down. Because I said the same thing way before that interview. I said, if you really look at it, every time that it was time to step up, he lost. Every time. Forget about the tail end of his career where he just started mentally collapsing even against Danny Green. But these are true facts. So I'm not going to dwell on this topic any longer, but you know, it is what it is. And hopefully this Anderson Silva fight can at least be something that he can kind of hang his hat on, because I know Adesanya is coming in there to starch him. And that's one thing I must say about Anderson. He is hittable. He can be elusive, but he tends to be very hittable. Adesanya, on the other hand, is not very hittable. And he's very cognizant of every single strike. So while Anderson has a better chin, he's not as cognizant of not being hit. Because naturally, as you age as a fighter, your legs go. So you're not going to be as elusive. So we're going to see what happens with that. Now the question is, does Adesanya have enough power to worry Anderson? I really would like to see that, because it's hard to say. I want to say no, but when you look at how he was able to floor Derek Brunson, it wasn't earth-shattering punches, but they had enough sting and pop on him. He throws his punches like a whip. He throws them from the hip. He tags Anderson with a few of those, he might start seeing a few stars. And if he's able to do it consistently without any opposition, and because of the speed differential, that could also be a problem. So there's a lot of factors to consider. We'll see as it plays out. But until then, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Jokatech podcast.
Taking it back against the elites, because it's all about technique. Technique and drive, and how a man on his own can survive. Master all the principles like a true disciple. Now he's on the road and he's on the road.